Hello and welcome back to Linode. In today's video, we're going to take a look at some concepts that we can implement that'll give our Linode server a basic level of security that'll better protect it from outside threats. Now, there's no way to make a server bulletproof, and the concepts around security are practically endless because it's a huge topic. But in this video, the essential things that we will implement will definitely give our Linode a layer of protection that'll definitely be helpful. So let's go ahead and dive in and take a look at some of the things that we can do to better secure our Linode. So let's go ahead and get started. Specific for this video, I have this test Linode right here running Ubuntu Server 2004. It's a nanode with 1 GB of RAM, a single CPU, and 25 GB of storage. Now what we should do is go ahead and get this server secured so it's better protected from outside threats. So first of all, I will copy the IP address so we can go ahead and use SSH to connect to it. And there we go. So now that I've logged in, we can see that I have 25 updates apparently that can be installed. And that actually brings me to my first point. You should always keep your Linode up to date. It's not good enough to simply install all of the patches the day you create the Linode. You should keep it up to date every single day and regularly install your patches. So let's go ahead and get those up to date. Now, the first thing we always want to do when we are using a package manager with a Linux distribution is update the repository index for the package manager. And since this is running Ubuntu, the command will look like this. On a Debian or Ubuntu system, it's pretty much the same on both. apt update will just update the repository index to basically refresh its understanding of what packages are available. It's not actually going to update anything. So anyway, I'll press enter here. So now that that's done, we can actually see from the output here that there are 26 packages that can be upgraded. And if you recall at the beginning of the video, it showed 25. And that's a good example of why we should run apt update before we perform package manager tasks, because we already have a new package that's made available since the last time this was refreshed. So to go ahead and install all the updates, we could run this command right here. apt dist upgrade. So this is going to do a full upgrade of all of the packages that are installed on the server currently. So I'll press enter. So we can see here that we have 26 packages to upgrade. And 6 of those are newly installed. And the Y here is capitalized, which means basically if we were to press enter, that's the default. It's going to go ahead and say yes. If we want to abort, we could just do N for no and press enter, and then it will abort that entire process. So I'll just press enter because I do want to get these upgraded. All right, so now all the packages on this Linode are all up to date. Now the commands that I've shown you so far are specific to Debian and Ubuntu. If your Linode is running something else, for example CentOS, then the command will change. In the documentation on the Linode website, there are examples for all the distributions that are supported. So at this point, it's a good idea to go ahead and reboot the Linode, because if we don't, then some of the patches won't take effect until the next time it starts up. So it's a good idea to go ahead and reboot it if you can. And that's actually pretty easy. If we go up here to the dashboard, where it shows running, we can go ahead and drop this down, and then we can click on reboot. Click reboot again. Then up here we get a progress bar that's going to show us the progress of the reboot. So we simply wait for the Linode to come back up, and then we can reconnect and continue on. All right, we should be back up and running, so we should be able to reconnect. Now, as we can see here, again, we have 0 packages that are available for updates, so we should be good to go. Now, I don't know about you, but I am very forgetful. I lose my car keys, I don't remember where I put my cell phone. My memory just isn't all that great, so remembering to install the updates on my Linode is just not something that I can trust myself to do. So what I do is I use unattended upgrades, and I highly recommend that even if you're not forgetful, because it's one less thing that you have to worry about. And each of the distributions have their own method for enabling automatic updates. So on Debian and Ubuntu, it's pretty simple, so I'll go ahead and show you what to do. For this, we will need to install a package. So if you haven't already run apt update to resynchronize your package index, you should go ahead and do that. But what we actually want to do is run apt install, and the package is unattended-upgrades. But I'll press enter. So as you can see here, unattended upgrades is already installed. And if you receive similar output, that's great. Then that means you already have the required package. But simply having unattended upgrades installed isn't enough to actually make it work. We need to go ahead and turn this feature on. So to do that, we will run dpkg reconfigure -- priority equals low, then unattended upgrades. And now here it's asking us if we want to go ahead and enable automatic updates. And that's the entire reason why we are going through this exercise. So I'll say yes. It's just basically a matter of pressing the left arrow and pressing enter. And there you go. So at this point forward, security updates should be installed automatically. Now moving on, there's another problem that we should take care of when it comes to securing our Linode. And that's the fact that I'm running as the root user. Now if you are just setting up your Linode for the very first time, then running as root is expected. But after you get everything all set up, it's better to run as a limited account and actually disable root login. So to do that, we should create a user account for ourselves. So to add a new user, we're going to use user add. Then we'll add the option -m so that our user will get a home directory. -s for the shell, we'll set it to bin bash, just like that. And then the name of the user that we want to create. So I'll just name mine J, my first name, keeps it simple. And then a double ampersand. And we'll use the passwd command because we want to set a password for the new user. And then we'll use the same username here as well. Now essentially here we have two different commands. The first one is creating the user, and then the second command is just setting the password. So I'll press enter. I'm just typing in the new password, the desired password that I want the new user to have. And that's basically all there is to it. So if we list the storage of the home directory, we should see a directory that is named the same as the user account that we've just created. And then if we check the etc password file, we can see the new user there at the bottom. And now the new user can go ahead and log into the system. At this point though, you should make sure that you have sudo installed. So you could do which and then sudo just like that, and you should get some output. If you don't get any output, then that means that the package is not installed. So on Debian and Ubuntu, it's apt install sudo. It's pretty easy. So once you have sudo installed, that's not enough to give you access to it. You have to make sure that your user is able to access the sudo command. And to do that, you can run by sudo just like that. And if you scroll down, you're looking for a group. And here we have two. Groups actually start with a % symbol. So we have the admin group, and we have the sudo group. So you can basically make your user a member of either of these two groups, and you should be good to go with sudo access for that user. And the reason why I'm having you guys pull this up is because different distributions will use a different group for sudo access by default. So on a CentOS system, for example, you might actually see a similar verbiage as I have here, but the group name might be wheel. So what you're going to do is choose a group that is shown in this file that has access to sudo, and again, we have admin and sudo in this case, then add your user to be a member of one of those groups. So to do that, we can run usermod -a uppercase G and then the name of the group, which could be, depending on your distribution, it could be sudo, it could be admin, it could be wheel, and so on. So I'm going to use sudo because that's the default for Ubuntu and Debian. And then the username you want to add to that group. To verify that everything worked out, you can run this command, groups, and then your username. And you should see that group that you have added that user to in the output to show that it has indeed been set up. So now that we have added our user account to the appropriate group, we can go ahead and switch to that user and just make sure that sudo works. So to do that, it's su hyphen, then the username that you've just created. And what we should be able to do is run a command with sudo. So I'll just do sudo apt update. Simple enough. It doesn't really matter. We just want to make sure that sudo actually works. I'll type in my user's password. And it's working. So it looks like my new user account has access to sudo, so everything seems to be working perfectly fine. So now let's go ahead and lock down OpenSSH. So I've exited my SSH session, and what I want to do is create a public-private key pair, basically an SSH key, that I can use to connect to the server, because the best thing that we can do is disable password access, which is what I'm going to show you how to do now. So first, we're going to need to generate an SSH key. And to do that, I will run ssh-keygen. I'll press enter. And it's going to default to adding the key into the .ssh directory inside your home directory with a default name of ID_RSA. Now, if you already have a key in your home directory in the .ssh folder with that name, it will be overwritten. So be careful of that if you already have a key. You can use the key that you've already generated if you have one, but if you overwrite that key, you'll never be able to get it back. So assuming that you don't already have a key with that name in that folder, we can press enter. And now we can enter a passphrase. Passphrases are optional, but highly recommended. But to keep the tutorial simple, I'll just press enter to bypass that for now. Then enter again. And now our SSH key is created. So if we take a look at the .ssh directory inside our home directory, you can see that we have two files, ID_RSA and ID_RSA.pub. Now this is actually the private key. We don't want to show that content to anyone for any reason, because that needs to be protected. There's a reason why that's called a private key. This key right here, the one that ends in a .pub extension, that's our public key. And it doesn't matter who we show that to. We can show that to everybody and it doesn't matter, because as long as we don't leak the private key, then we're fine. But how does that help us with SSH? Well, what we can do is copy this key over to our Linode. And to do that, we will use this command right here, ssh-copy-id. We'll use the option -i, and then the tilde.sh, and then the public key file, which is this one right here. We'll type in the username, then the @ symbol, and then we'll paste in the IP address. So essentially what we're doing is we're using the ssh-copy-id command, giving it an input file that is the public key, the one that we've just created. And then we give it the username to our Linode then the IP address of our Linode. And if I press enter, it'll ask me for the password for SSH. So I'll type that in. And it's dropped me back to the shell of my laptop, but it says number of keys added 1. So now if I go ahead and SSH into the Linode, just like this, and now you'll notice that I was immediately connected to the Linode and it didn't even ask me for the password for my user. And this is one of the benefits of having an SSH key, because it simplifies access via SSH to the server. But the entire reason why we're doing this is not to make SSH easier, although, well, that's a great added benefit. The reason that we're doing that is because this allows us to lock down SSH altogether. And what we'll need to do in order to accomplish that is edit the SSH config file for the SSH daemon. And we can do that by entering sudo nano, or whatever text editor you want to use, /etc/sshd_config, just like that, and press enter. Type in my password. Now if we scroll down a little bit here, we have permit root login, yes. We want to change that to no, because that's a user account that is going to be targeted first for intrusions from the outside. So by setting this to no, we are not allowing root to log in at all. Now what we could also do is add a new option, and it doesn't really matter where, but I'm going to add it right here. And that could be allow with a capital A, users with a capital U, no space there, and then a list of usernames we want to allow to SSH into our Linode, so I'll add mine. If you have other users that you want to access the Linode, then you can add them here on this line as well, with a space in between each. So for example, we could do something like this to allow Tim and Sue access to the Linode, for example, but I'm going to simply leave my name right here. Control O to save the file, and Control X to exit out. And then we will go ahead and restart the service. And this should be the command on quite a few distributions actually. So I'll just enter this command to restart the SSH daemon. So notice that when I restarted the SSH daemon, it didn't drop my SSH session. I still have that open. I can still use it. And you definitely don't want to disconnect until you know that it's working. And what we could do is open a new tab. Then in the new tab, we could simply SSH into the IP address of our Linode. Make sure that it still works. And it does. So that's very important. Again, we want to make sure that SSH is fully working before we drop out of our original shell, because if we dropped out of that shell, then, well, we've actually lost our only way into the server. But on this new tab, I've actually created a new SSH session that allowed me in, so I know that it's working fine. Worst case scenario, if you do get locked out, you can actually go into the Lish console on the Linode dashboard and you can fix it from there, so no big deal. Now another thing that we can do is make sure that we don't have any services running that are listening for outside connections, because the fewer ports that are open, the more secure our server actually is. So what we can do is run sudo ss-atpu, just like that. Type in my super secret password yet again. And we can see a list of ports that are actually listening for outside connections. Now already we have SSH, and that's okay because I want that. I want to be able to use SSH, and we've just secured that just now, so that's not really a concern to me. We also have HTTP listed right here, and that's also expected in my case because I am running Apache 2, which is a popular web server. This is actually running a blog, so it is important for this server to be listening for connections via port 80 for Apache. But if you see anything here that you can't explain, anything that's open to the world that doesn't have a justification, it's important to go ahead and remove it. So for example, if you had postfix listed, you could run sudo apt remove postfix if that wasn't something that you were trying to run or didn't need. Now, I can't show you a complete walkthrough of this because depending on what you have installed on your Linode, this is going to be different for everyone. Essentially what you're doing is you are running the ss command like we have here and looking for some port that is listening that you don't have a justification for. And if it has no purpose, then go ahead and remove it. Because again, the fewer services that you have running that are listening for outside connections, the more secure your Linode is. So when it comes to security, there's many different things that we can do to protect our servers from outside harm. In this video, we took a look at some of the foundational concepts that we can utilize to better secure our servers, things like securing OpenSSH, for example. But it doesn't stop here. The road to a completely secure server is never ending. There's a lot more that we can do, but the concepts that we've gone over in this video will definitely get us off to a good start. So thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.